I returned home from vacation and couldn't believe my eyes. A new garage stood in my yard, built by Karen, the president of the HOA. She stood with her arms crossed, and I immediately rushed toward her. "This is illegal!" I shouted, unable to contain my anger. "What have you done?" "Your land belongs to the HOA, and you're the one breaking the law," she replied coldly, a look of confidence on her face. "I make the rules here, and you have to follow them." I took a step forward, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You have no right to build on my land without my permission. I'm contacting my lawyer immediately. This won't go without consequences." Karen laughed, shrugging her shoulders. "Go ahead with your lawyers. I have the HOA's support and you won't win. You don't even know how this works." Now, to understand why she thought my property was hers, let's go back to the very beginning. I had worked hard to buy my land. It wasn't just a piece of property to me. It was everything I had worked for, my dream realized. I had spent countless hours researching, saving money, and ultimately purchasing this quiet, peaceful piece of land far away from the noise and stress of the city. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could relax, unwind, and escape from the hectic world. The land wasn't just a plot with a small house on it. It was the symbol of my sacrifice and dedication. I built that house with my own hands. Every nail, every piece of wood, every square inch was my creation. I had made this place my own, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Before starting this crazy HOA story, take a pause, subscribe, and share. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It's always interesting to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get started. For the first few years, things were quiet. The neighborhood was calm, and the HOA was nothing more than a distant idea that barely affected me. I lived my life, enjoying the solitude, and rarely interacted with the other residents. The HOA's rules didn't apply to me since my property wasn't technically part of the community they governed. But everything changed when Karen became the new president of the HOA. It was as if she suddenly felt she had control over everything. Every inch of land, every rule, and every person. The once quiet community quickly became her playground, and she was making changes left and right. New rules were imposed weekly, some nonsensical, others outright illegal. She would push through whatever policies suited her, and if anyone spoke out, she'd shut them down. At first, I thought I could ignore it. After all, my property wasn't part of the HOA jurisdiction, right? But Karen didn't care about the rules, and she didn't care about I had been away for a couple of weeks, visiting my family for the holidays. The whole time I was gone, I felt a sense of peace and relief, knowing that my property was safe. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I returned, the first thing I noticed was that something felt off. The air, which had always been filled with the peaceful sounds of nature, seemed unnervingly still. When I turned the corner and approached my driveway, I saw something that made my heart drop. A garage! But not just any garage. A massive, brand-new structure that had been built on my land. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Perhaps a neighbor had built over the property line by mistake? But as I walked closer, my heart sank deeper. There was a sign on the side of the garage, HOA property no trespassing. It was right there, staring me in the face, and under that sign stood Karen, grinning like she had just claimed her prize. My blood began to boil. This wasn't just some mistake. Karen had deliberately built on my land without my permission, and now she was standing there smirking as if she had done me a favor. I walked up to her, trying to stay calm, but my voice betrayed me. "You're trespassing," I said, clenching my fists. Karen laughed dismissively. "No, you are. This land is now part of the HOA. We voted on it while you were away." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean voted on it? You can't just vote to take someone's land. That's not how ownership works." She shrugged nonchalantly. "It's for the good of the community. This garage will be used for parking and storage for HOA events. You should be thankful we're improving the neighborhood." Thankful? She had literally stolen my land and built on it without any permission, and now she wanted me to be grateful? I felt my anger building, but I knew I had to stay composed. "Karen, you have no legal right to do this. I have the deed, the property records, Everything that proves this land is mine. I'm giving you one chance to undo this before I take legal action." Her smirk faltered for a moment, but then she snapped, "You can't do anything about it. The HOA makes the rules around here." Oh, how wrong she was. This was just the beginning of her downfall. I didn't waste any time. The next day, I called a lawyer to explain the situation. When I spoke to him, he immediately confirmed what I had already suspected. Karen had violated multiple laws, including trespassing and illegal construction. She had no right to build anything on my property, and I was within my legal rights to take action. But things quickly escalated. Before I could even serve her with legal papers, Karen made a move that took everything to the next level. She didn't just stop with the garage. No, she decided to build a fence around my entire property and put up more signs, claiming that it now belonged to the HOA. She was trying to erase the boundaries of my land completely. That was it. It was no longer just a matter of fixing the mistake. I was going to make sure Karen paid for this, legally and financially. I immediately started gathering evidence. I hired experts to get detailed reports of the property lines, and I took before and after pictures of the land. I found out she had used HOA funds to pay for the garage and the fence without consulting any of the other homeowners. This was not just an infringement on my property rights, it was an outright abuse of power. When we filed the lawsuit, Karen pulled out all the stops. She claimed I had abandoned my property, suggesting that because I had been gone for a couple of weeks, I didn't deserve to keep it. She even argued that the HOA had verbal approval for the construction, and that I was being selfish by not letting the HOA use my land for their events. But I wasn't backing down. We presented all the evidence, property records, photos, and legal documents that proved she was in the wrong. And then came the bombshell. We discovered that Karen had used the HOA's funds to finance the construction without even consulting the homeowners. The HOA's own money had been misused for her personal agenda. When the judge heard about the misuse of HOA funds, it was game over for Karen. The court ruled in my favor, and Karen was ordered to remove everything she had built on my land, all at her own expense. But that wasn't all. Not only was Karen forced to tear down the garage and the fence, but she was also ordered to pay me for the damages to my property and cover all my legal fees. That's when the tide really started to turn. The other homeowners in the HOA were furious when they found out what Karen had done. They had no idea she was using their dues to fund her illegal actions, and they weren't about to let her get away with it. At the next HOA meeting, the residents voted her out of office, and Karen lost all her power in the community. But that wasn't the worst part for her. Because she had spent so much of her own money on the illegal construction, she ended up financially ruined. All the money she had invested in her scheme, money she had poured into building the garage and the fence, was now lost. She had no choice but to cover the costs of the demolition, and she couldn't even recover her losses. In the end, I got my land back, every single inch of it. But more importantly, Karen learned the hard way that you can't just take what doesn't belong to you. Justice was served, and I was able to return to my peaceful retreat, knowing that no one would be able to take it from me again. So let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can get away with messing with someone else's property. Don't do it. It's never worth it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to not miss new HOA horror stories.